So now it's time to ask the question, what metric do firms use to gauge and guide their development activities? There's actually a lot of different metrics that they use. Again, the basic idea is how well developed is this customer for the firm? Or look at it the other way around, how well developed is this firm in the customer's mind or the customer's wallet? So a very common metric that's used here is share of wallet. Of all of a customer's needs for a particular product or service, for the category as a whole, how many of those needs are met by this firm? So as I said, there's a number of other metrics. What some firms look at is the number of different products and services that the customer has with them. So as a very specific example, Wells Fargo, big retail bank here in the US, they're obsessed over number of services per customer. Okay, the CEO, you could ask him at any given moment, what's the average number of services per customer? How does that vary over time? How does it vary across customer groups? He understands that customer development is really critical there. So, but we're going to look at share of wallet. Again, they're very closely related to each other. So the question is, what does share of wallet tell us? Okay, it's a decent metric. I think it's a good metric to look at. But I want to understand how it really fits in. See, I want to understand the interrelationship between share of wallet, how well developed we are with a customer, and overall size of wallet or overall CLV. How much overall value does this customer have? So there's been a lot of research that's looked at the interplay of size of wallet and share of wallet. You can see a screenshot here about some work done by some colleagues at Duke University who looked very carefully at this very issue. What's the interrelationship between size and share of customer wallet? And the results they got are very interesting. It's a very well done study, and I absolutely believe the results. So let's jump in and look at the results. And so you can see this chart over here, and it shows you the relationship between share and size of wallet. So going along the bottom of the picture, you can see share of wallet broken up into 5 groups. People to the left with a really small share of wallet, people to the right with a very high share of wallet. And up and down in the picture is the total wallet size, or again, thinking about that as a proxy for CLV, the overall worth of this customer, the overall capability to spend in this entire product category. And if you look at this picture, and if I ask you what's interesting about it, you see a lot of big circles to the left. And what else is there? Well, there's that big circle to the lower right. And if you think about that for a moment, it's not really very interesting. What that's telling us is, for customers who have a very small wallet size, in other words, for customers who don't have a lot of money to spend, or don't necessarily have a lot of CLV, they tend to put all their eggs in one basket. I mean, think about it this way. If you only have $1 to spend, you're going to spend it all in one place. And so it's not surprising that the customers with very small value are going to have very, very high share of wallet. They're going to be very well developed, but they're not necessarily very good customers in terms of CLV. So you know what? Let's eliminate that bottom row. Not to say that we don't care about those customers, but I do want to make a point over here. If we get rid of those really low-value customers, the ones with the really small wallets, what else do we see? Now if I ask you to describe this picture over here in terms of the relationship between share of wallet and size of wallet, what do we see? Good answer. Pretty much nothing. There seems to be no systematic relationship between share of wallet and size of wallet. So as my colleague said in this paper over here, share of wallet is largely independent of size of wallet. In other words, a very well-developed customer isn't necessarily more valuable than a less developed customer. This is a really important point. It suggests that while we want to develop our customers, at the margin we always want our customers to be more valuable to us. It doesn't necessarily have this real strong causal relationship with overall CLV. So let's look at another quote from this paper that I think does a very nice job of summarizing the good news and the bad news about cross-selling or other customer development activities. So here's the good news. If customers we have a really high share with them, they buy a lot of stuff from us in one category, they're likely to buy from us in other categories. If we can sell them a checking account, then there's a pretty good chance that we can get them to get a savings account from us as well. That's the good news. The bad news is, it suggests that some customers just inherently love us. This is the celebration of heterogeneity, and they're going to buy pretty much everything we have to offer. And there are some customers who, take it or leave it. They might have a particular service from us. We're lucky that we have any of their business, but they're not necessarily going to become better customers all of a sudden if we push another service on them. This is the big issue with customer development. We want to do it all the time. We're always going to be saying, do you want fries with that? Do you want to supersize that? We're always going to be looking for opportunities to create and extract a little bit more value from our customers. But too many companies believe that these development activities will systematically, fundamentally change the overall value of our customers. That tends to be untrue. I'm not saying it's always untrue, but for the most part, development activities are good, they're important to do, but they're not necessarily going to fundamentally change the nature of the customers. So we want to do development activities, but the way I like to think about them is that they're more like icing on the cake. It's going to let us create and extract a little bit more value than we would have had otherwise, but it doesn't necessarily change the customer. Now, a lot of companies would disagree with me on that. A lot of companies would say, you know what, we put this offer in front of the customer, and not only did he take it, but he bought lots of other things as well. Here's my point. The celebration of heterogeneity suggests that this customer was actually pretty valuable all along, or had high potential value all along. We as a company were just unable to see it and to unlock it. And so we're going to do these development activities not so much to fundamentally change the customer, but to find out what kind of value they already had locked in them, and to help us unlock it and really fully enjoy it. So that's why we have to do development activities, but it doesn't necessarily change customers. And so you can see where I'm going with this. And in fact, if I can now combine together all three tactics, acquisition, retention, development, and if I go back and ask my question again, if we had that one extra dollar to spend, where would you spend it? Acquisition, retention, or development? And as I said, most people, most companies downplay acquisition and really focus on retention and development. But you can see where I'm going with it. Now, in no way do I want to minimize the importance of retention or development, but at the margin, if we just have that extra dollar to spend, I think we really want to spend it on acquisition. And again, that reflects customer-centric thinking, which is very, very different than the traditional product-centric thinking. But that's why thinking in a customer-centric manner and celebrating, understanding heterogeneity can lead to dramatically different conclusions. Now, I want to be careful about making that statement. I don't want to say that it's always true. If you're in a market where there's intense competition, and you've basically saturated the market, and every customer, every potential customer has already been acquired and sometimes worked with multiple firms, then acquisition might not make most sense. Because then the only customers who are left out there are probably customers who aren't very valuable, and other companies were willing to let them go. So there's lots and lots of exceptions to the general advice that I'm offering. Again, if you're in a very saturated market, hanging on to your really valuable customers is going to make more sense than acquiring new ones. But in general, for most companies, for most markets, when there's a lot of customers still out there who haven't been fully valued by different companies, at the margin, I think acquisition makes more sense. But more importantly than telling you exactly how to spend the money, I just want you to be thinking about some of these marginal decisions and this clearer understanding of the trade-offs between acquisition, retention, development. I also want to shed light on the conventional wisdom that we associate with some of these trade-offs. So for instance, let me show you a piece of conventional wisdom over here. Many of you have read this, many of you have said this, many of you perhaps have managed your business around this. The basic idea that it costs so much more money to acquire a new customer than to retain one. So we have to work really hard to keep the ones that we have. Again, I'm sure that many of you have heard that advice, and even if you haven't, it makes a lot of sense, right? Well, let's think about it. I don't want to suggest that that conventional wisdom is untrue. Okay, you know what? It probably is true. It does cost more to acquire a new customer, especially a good new customer, than to retain existing customers. But what's my take on it? Well, let's go back to my coverage of acquisition. Let's not focus on costs. Let's not worry about costs. Let's worry about value. And if we're spending too much time, more importantly, if we're spending too much money retaining customers who aren't really that valuable to us, maybe we're better off reaching a little bit higher, spending a little bit of money to go out there and find a customer or a group of customers who might actually be more valuable than some of those customers who are spending so much time trying to retain and develop. And so again, the conventional wisdom might be right, but when you take this forward-looking, value-oriented perspective, if we're focusing more on CLV as opposed to CPA, then this kind of conventional wisdom won't really impact you that much. Don't be so cheap. Don't be so lazy. Go out there and figure out where the valuable customers, valuable potential customers reside, and do what it takes to get them on board. And then let nature take its course. Okay, yes, you want to spend time retaining them. Yes, you want to ask them if they want fries with that. But because they're better customers, they're going to naturally stick around longer. They're going to naturally buy more products and services from you, and you'll see the gains in the long run. They'll be worth the investment. So that's my overall take on some of the trade-offs between acquisition, retention, development. Let me just summarize it for you, and then we'll step back and take a last look at all of customer centricity. So I keep saying it all along, and I hope that you can appreciate how customer centricity is a celebration of heterogeneity. And by really understanding, by measuring and fully appreciating heterogeneity, it brings new light onto acquisition, retention, and development. And at the margin, or at least in many situations, the greatest opportunity to improve customer profitability is through what I like to call smart acquisition. Let's not just go out there and bring in a bunch of customers as cheaply as possible. But if we can be smart, if we can look at our customers, fully utilize all the data that we have on them, and understand how, when, and where we acquired them, we can go out there and get some really good customers. Now, retention and development are important, but let me just say one more time that so much of our retention spending is going towards flighty customers who are likely to leave anyway. And it's going to cost a lot of money to keep them coming. We're going to have to keep spending over and over and over again. And while we're tempted to do that because we have these customers in our hand and we want to maintain or build on the relationships that we have with them, if they're not that great, it's going to be really hard, it's going to be really expensive, it's going to be frustrating to do so. So we do have to spend appropriately on retention and indeed on development. We always want to ask that great question, do you want fries with that? We always want to try different kinds of development activities, but recognizing that it's more icing on the cake than a way, in most cases, to fundamentally change customers. And the final piece of that is, let's not worry so much about conventional product-centric wisdom that we often use to run our marketing activities. Let's think about future-looking customer value, CLV, and that's going to lead us to some very different kinds of decisions. So those are the trade-offs. Let's wrap up by thinking about the overall customer centricity one more time.